once again, ladies and gentlemen, Deputy Prime Minister and Coordinating Minister for Economic Policies, Mr. Heng Swee Keat. Please remain in your seats, ladies and gentlemen, while we take DPM Heng around for introductions. Deputy Prime Minister Heng, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Angelique Teo and it gives me great pleasure to be your host for the evening. May I please call your attention to the screens.
The global population is growing and will face a food crisis. Food production today consumes immense resources and adds to the world's greenhouse gas emissions. With rising temperatures, we're still not doing enough to feed our future generations. Food production in Asia needs to transform to ensure long-term food security in Asia. These trends are what Asian consumers are looking for to improve their farm-to-fork experiences. Changing food preferences will drive incremental food spend. The deployment and adoption of technologies and innovation at scale will help solve our challenges. Together, we can transform our food system. Singapore is well poised to become an agri-food technology hub in Asia. The Singapore International Agri-Food Week is a platform for innovators, corporates, and regulators to collaborate for the future of sustainable foods in Asia. The Regulators Roundtable by Singapore Food Agency gathers global regulators and industry players together for robust exchanges. The Asia-Pacific Agri-Food Innovation Summit offers thought leadership and networking for international business leaders. Agri-Food Tech Expo Asia provides an experiential living lab to showcase new food innovations. Together, we aim to build resilient food systems and bolster food security in Asia.
Now, the food we eat relies on systems that have been pushed close to their breaking point due to COVID-19, as well as increasing environmental and climate stress. The inaugural Singapore International Agri-Food Week seeks to catalyze sustainable food systems and production in Asia by bringing industry leaders together, as issues of this scale can only be tackled by collective action. This platform, where like-minded partners can gather, was brought together by a partnership of the following organizations: Temasek, Singapore Economic Development Board, Enterprise Singapore, Singapore Food Agency, Singapore Tourism Board, and event organizers Rethink Events, as well as Constella. Over the next few days, topics that will be discussed include driving agri-food innovation and collaboration opportunities in Asia, safety assessments of novel foods, empowering smallholder farmers to optimizing controlled environment agriculture, as well as aquaculture. For today's event, Mr. Lim Boon Heng, Chairman Temasek Holdings, will deliver the opening address. This will be followed by the signing of 3 memorandums of understanding. Next, Mr. Richard Skinner, Partner, Strategy and Food Security Specialist, PwC Singapore, will share the key findings from the recently published Asia Food Challenge Report 2021. And just before dinner, yes, we will be feeding you, there will be a fireside chat session on the next phase of agri-food development and collaboration in Asia. We cap off today's event with dinner, and in keeping with the event's theme of sustainable foods, please look forward to a range of delectable dishes prepared by talented chefs from Salad Stop, Classic Fine Foods, as well as Marina Bay Sands, using locally sourced greens and alternative proteins. To start off this evening, I would now like to invite for the opening address, Mr. Lim Boon Heng, Chairman, Temasek Holdings. Mr. Lim, please.
Deputy Prime Minister, Mr. Eng Swee Keat, esteemed ambassadors from the European Union, Hungary, Israel, Japan, Malaysia, and the Netherlands, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Welcome to the launch of the inaugural Singapore International Agri-Food Week, or SIAW. The COVID pandemic has tested the world's food system tremendously over the last 2 years. In addition, economic crisis as a result of ever more visible signs of environmental and climate stress have pushed these systems to their limits. Our natural resources are being depleted at an alarming rate. Humanity is staring at the planetary crisis threatening our collective future. We cannot maintain the status quo without consequences that affect everyone on our planet. A key question arises: how do we build sustainable food systems that can satisfy the world's increasing demand for food while reducing its environmental impact? This is the key question you deal with over this week. I'm pleased to see so many of you come together physically and virtually to share perspectives. Many of the world's food systems are fragile and are inadequate to provide sufficient nutrition for a population of 10 billion by 2050. The recent IPCC report estimates that food systems contribute up to 30% of total greenhouse gas emissions. Food production alone utilizes over 70% of fresh water in most regions of the world. Climate change and environmental degradation will hit Asian food production the hardest, as we have more people in coastal cities than all the other parts of the world combined. Sea level rises and severe weather events will affect more people in Asia than anywhere else. We need to catalyze solutions to change how our food systems operate while we focus on reducing global emissions. It is a tall order to achieve both. However, it is key to ensure that we have long-term food security and that our people get the nutrition they need to live healthier lives. Together with PwC and Rabobank, Temasek has just published the Asia Food Challenge report. It points to changing consumption patterns and the demand for higher quality food by consumers. The report estimates these drivers, among others, will lead to spending increases of $2.4 trillion on food over the next decade. This is a huge opportunity if we get it right. With investment in technology-led innovation and digital inclusivity, our supply chains can bring fresh, safe, and nutritious food to consumers more sustainably. Smallholder farmers, who are responsible for producing 80% of the food consumed in Asia, do face accessibility barriers to adopt technological solutions. I'm pleased that our portfolio companies are building digital solutions to achieve more sustainable farm management practices. Olam, for instance, helps farmers by providing access to products, advice, and trade services through a digital platform known as Java. The Heart is an Indian-based agri-tech platform which offers end-to-end agricultural services to farmers in India. And there are others. The report also highlights the growing appetite for alternative proteins in Asia. This unlocks new growth potential for food producers to continue making themselves more sustainable because of the much lower environmental impact of these alternatives. The scale of this transformation presents a significant opportunity for investors. Industry players are developing new technologies to make food production more sustainable in response to the climate crisis and to help meet the evolving tastes and demands of Asian consumers. Investment will be required to bring innovations to scale. Collaboration and action are the two watchwords for this event. I hope the Singapore International Agri-Food Week helps facilitate ideas and best practices to catalyze action, and that partnerships are formed here that translate to longer-term collaboration. I hope the result of this will be a more sustainable and resilient food system within and beyond Asia. With that, I wish all of you many fruitful discussions and meaningful connections this week at SIAW. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lim. And next, I would like to invite Deputy Prime Minister and Coordinating Minister for Economic Policies, Mr. Heng Swee Keat, to deliver his keynote speech. Minister Heng, please.
Mr. Lim Boon Heng, Chairman of Temasek Holdings, Mr. Dilan Pillay Chandrasekara, CEO of Temasek Holdings, ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen, very good evening to everyone. Thank you for inviting me for the inaugural Singapore International Agri-Food Week. The world is facing an increasing global food challenge. What we are seeing is a K-shaped phenomenon. With a growing middle class, affluent consumers are prepared to pay more for quality food, especially for those that are tasty, healthy, and safe. The growing demand for meat and seafood is adding to carbon emissions. Yet, food security remains an issue as the world's population grows. Around 800 million people go to bed hungry every night. Rising temperatures have adversely impacted crop yield, with a disproportionate effect on the poor. It is most timely that we are gathered here today to look at sustainable food production, both to meet the demands of a growing middle class and to provide food security for all. The opportunities are vast. In Asia alone, food expenditure is expected to double from US $4 trillion today to US $8 trillion by 2030. Half of the increase in Asia is attributed to discretionary consumer spending, while the other half is to feed an increasing population. To meet these food needs, an estimated total investment of US $1.55 trillion is needed by 2030. But we cannot simply invest in more of the same. There is a limit on arable land and acceptable carbon emissions for food production. The consumer palate of the middle class is also evolving. We must innovate to break out of current constraints, to deliver value to consumers, and ensure food security for all. Global investments in food and agri-tech have been increasing during the pandemic. Temasek has invested over US $8 billion in the agri-food sector over the past decade. Singapore has also made R&D in food a key part of our research efforts, and we're building up deep capabilities in food sciences in A-Star. We also have the Singapore Food Story R&D program, which is focused on innovations in sustainable urban food solutions, advanced biotech in protein production, and food safety science and innovation. To start off this long weekend dialogue, a week-long dialogue, let's share some food for thought on how we can further advance food innovation. Through our collective efforts and ingenuity, we can tackle the 3 zeros of the global food challenge: zero hunger, zero waste, and net carbon zero. Let me start with zero hunger. The world's population is estimated to increase to 10 billion people by 2050. But the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change warned that crop yield may drop by up to 30% in 2050 due to climate change. To compound matters, 1/3 of global food production is by smallholder farmers. They have very limited access to capital and productivity, much less the ability to innovate and experiment with new techniques. A step change is required to feed the world. Technology can make a big difference in improving crop yields and the quality of crops. With big data and IoT, we can transform food production and farm management, especially in an urban, high-density farming environment. In addition, improvements in agricultural inputs can improve yield, quality, and the nutritional value of crops. One example is Commonwealth Greens, a local indoor vegetable farm that leverages smart sensors and data analytics to optimize crop yield, nutrition, and taste. Commonwealth Greens can produce many times more vegetables on the same plot of land. Its vegetables are also pesticide-free. Another example is Blue Ocean Aquaculture Technology, or BOAT. This is an indoor land-based fish farm located in an industrial building. Through nanobubble technology and with a recirculating aquaculture system, fish can be farmed in a water-efficient way at high density. Tech can also help smallholder farmers access productivity tools and finance. Digitalization can help smallholder farmers with market access and prevents them from being marginalized in the value chain. The use of data-driven solutions can also empower them to increase crop yield. FIFO, a Singapore-headquartered startup, develops and rents out ready-to-farm spaces called co-farms. Besides providing the infrastructure and technology, FIFO also onboards smallholder farmers to their platform, which digitalizes their seed-to-sale protocols, empowering farmers with more data and a sales channel to reliable contract buyers. Through innovation and technology, we can produce more nutritious food in a way that's more sustainable at a price that is affordable. This is critical to tackling the challenge of zero hunger. Let me now touch on the next zero, zero waste. Food shortages is in part exacerbated by food waste. Globally, 1.3 billion tons of food is wasted each year. This is equivalent to 1/3 of the total food produced for human consumption. In Singapore alone, we generated around more than 650,000 tons of food waste last year. This is equivalent to 1.5 bowls of rice per person per day. So the amount of food wasted globally each year is staggering. So this is a little reminder that we must all finish our food later. Technology can also help reduce food waste along the supply chain. Through the end-to-end digitalization of supply chain, we can significantly improve the efficiency of the movement of goods and track this movement in real time. Shorter transportation time reduces spoilage, while real-time visibility reduces the need for importers to add a buffer in their orders. Innovation in cold chain and other technologies have also enabled us to keep food fresher for longer. One example is Appeal Sciences, which Temasek has invested in. The company invented an edible, tasteless, and odorless plant-based protective coating for fruits and vegetables. This reduces water loss and oxidation, which keeps the food fresher for longer. In many parts of society have also taken steps to reduce food waste. The best way to manage food waste is to avoid generating it in the first place. Singapore recently launched the third nationwide Say Yes to Waste Less campaign. This year, 169 partners have committed to various actions to reduce food wastage. These include prompting customers to order just enough food, planning meals in advance, and making use of blemished or surplus food. There are also many ground-up initiatives to reduce food waste. For example, social enterprise Just Tapao redistributes unsold surplus food by connecting consumers and eateries through their platforms, which offers a surplus food at a significant discount. In addition to minimizing the production of food waste, there are various initiatives to close the food waste loop. At our Tampines hub, food waste from the hawker center and restaurants are processed on-site into compost. The compost is used at the hub's rooftop garden and distributed to residents. In Singapore, new developments are now required to set aside space for on-site food waste treatment. New users have also been found for food waste by converting them into other useful products. One example is NUS startup Cosmode Health, which processes barley spent grains into fine protein powder that is used to manufacture high-fiber protein noodle. Through a combination of strategies, we can cut down on food waste. This, in turn, relieves the pressure on food production, making sure less go hungry. This brings me to my third zero, net carbon zero. As we saw in the video earlier on, food production contributes about 1/3 of global greenhouse emission. It is not sustainable to continue to scale production as is. The 1.5 degrees target for climate change cannot be met if food production remains unchanged. More efficient food production and reducing food waste will cut our carbon footprint. But this is not enough. Meat is a major contributor of food-related carbon emissions. One way is to shift consumption patterns away from meat and seafood to eating more vegetables, fruits, and nuts. This not only leads to lower carbon emissions, but is also healthier. Increasingly, there is another option, alternative proteins. I've tried some of these products, and they taste almost like the real thing. Alternative protein is much more sustainable compared to traditional cattle and poultry farming. For example, plant-based Just Egg uses 98% less water, has a 93% smaller carbon footprint, and uses 86% less land than conventional animal sources. A Just Egg production facility is now being built in Singapore. We're also seeing an increasingly wider range of alternative proteins emerging, from Impossible Beef to Tender Chicken and Perfect Day Milk. But with the prevalence of novel food, there are also greater concerns about food safety. These foods do not have a history of being consumed by humans and should be evaluated carefully for food safety. There's currently no international set of guidelines for novel foods. The Singapore Food Agency has taken the lead to establish a regulatory framework on the safety requirements for novel food. It has also established a novel food safety experts working group to provide scientific advice on these matters. Earlier this morning, the organizers convened a roundtable on novel food regulations. Such exchanges will raise awareness on new technologies for novel food production, discuss the challenges in safety assessment, and explore opportunities to advance the regulatory agenda while encouraging food innovations. Having set out the ways to tackle the 3 zeros of the Global Food Challenge, the question is, how can we get there? I'm pleased to learn that Temasek will be launching the Asia Sustainable Foods Platform. This end-to-end platform seeks to accelerate the pace of adoption for sustainable food at every stage of a food tech company's growth. Temasek is starting this new platform in partnerships with like-minded stakeholders. The platform will partner A-Star to build the Food Tech Innovation Center to facilitate the commercialization of R&D. A total of over $30 million will be invested in the next 3 years to help startups with their product and process development, especially for alternative proteins. In addition, the platform is seeking to offer contract manufacturing services for plant-based protein products and microbial proteins. The former is a joint venture of German firm Creamer, while the latter is in partnership with American company ADM. So congratulations to Temasek and your partners on this endeavor. Finally, I warmly congratulate Temasek and your partners on tonight's successful launch of the Singapore International Agri-Food Week. This annual affair serves as a valuable platform to exchange ideas and forge new collaboration with Singapore as a global node for agri-food innovation. So let me conclude by saying that this event this evening is just an appetizer. I hope you'll lead to main courses of changes and collaboration to tackle the global food challenge. And with the outstanding minds gathered here and your healthy appetite to make a difference, we can create a better, more livable world for everyone. If we can tackle the global food challenge, it will be sweet dessert for all of us in this world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, DPM Heng. Can I please request that you remain on stage to witness the MOU signing? Now, we shall now proceed with the MOU signing for Singapore International Agri-Food Week. Before I invite our guests up for the first MOU, ladies and gentlemen, just a gentle reminder that if you're not eating, to please leave your masks on. We'd like to make the job for the safety distancing ambassadors a little bit easier. Thank you. For the first MOU, please welcome to the stage Dr. Tan Lee Kim, Director General, Food Administration and Deputy Chief Executive Officer for Singapore Food Agency. Dr. Yeo Kiat Chuan, Deputy Head, Enterprise Development Group, Deputy Head, Singapore Projects of Temasek. Ms. Jenny Moss, Founder and Managing Director of Rethink Events. And Mr. Chua Wee Pong, Chief Executive, Markets of Constella. I'd also like to invite Mr. Yap Chin Siang, Deputy Chief Executive, Singapore Tourism Board, up on stage to join DPM Heng as witnesses to the signing of the MOUs that are about to be signed. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. This MOU constitutes a 3-year commitment from Temasek, Singapore Food Agency SFA, Economic Development Board EDB, Enterprise Singapore ESG, Singapore Tourism Board STB, Rethink Events and Constella to jointly organize the annual Singapore International Agri-Food Week, SIAW. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let's commence with the signing. Today's signing of a Memorandum of Understanding marks the start of a strategic collaboration for the future of agri-food events and building Singapore into an international agri-food hub. With the 2021 edition being the first, the annual week of events aims to gather businesses, thought leaders, and innovators from the agri-food industry, facilitating the sharing of best practices, showcasing the latest innovative technologies, and highlighting upcoming business opportunities in the sector. Now that everything has been signed, I'd like to invite all signatories to stand behind the table for a group photograph. Please take your folders with you. And if we can have you all open the folders and hold them up in front of you. And smile as much as you can through your masks. Thank you, everybody, and congratulations to all on this strategic collaboration. DPM Heng and Mr. Yap, please remain on stage for the next MOU. Next, we shall proceed to sign 2 MOUs for business events taking place under the Singapore International Agri-Food Week umbrella. The first will be a 3-year memorandum of understanding between the Singapore Tourism Board and Rethink Events to anchor the Asia-Pacific Agri-Food Innovation Summit in Singapore from 2022 to 2024. I would like to invite Mr. Po Chi Chuan, Executive Director, Singapore Tourism Board, to come on stage, as well as back on stage, Ms. Jenny Moss, Managing Director, Rethink Events. The signing will be witnessed by Deputy Prime Minister and Coordinating Minister for Economic Policies, Mr. Heng Swee Keat, and Mr. Yap Chin Siang, Deputy Chief Executive, Singapore Tourism Board. And now we can commence with the signing. This MOU marks the joint commitment of these parties to anchor and grow the Asia-Pacific Agri-Food Innovation Summit in Singapore from 2022 to 2024. The summit convenes the world's leading agri-businesses, growers, consumer packaged goods and ingredient brands, entrepreneurs, investors, retailers, and policymakers to share ideas and collaborate towards greater security and sustainability in Asia's agri-food system. It will feature curated content and platforms for high-value connections and knowledge exchange, attracting international business leaders to Singapore and supporting the growth of Asia's agri-food innovation ecosystem. The summit's 2021 edition takes place from the 16th to the 18th of this month and is expected to draw 200 in-person attendees and 600 additional participants joining virtually from around the world. I would now like to invite both of you to stand behind the table for a group photograph. Take the folders with you and you can hold them open in front of you as we take this group photograph. And congratulations to all on this strategic collaboration. Thank you very much, Ms. Moss and Mr. Po. You may now take your seats. I'd like to invite DPM Heng and Mr. Yap to remain on stage once again for the 3rd Memorandum of Understanding for Business Events. Now, this will be between the Singapore Tourism Board, Constella, and DLG, German Agricultural Society, to officially launch and anchor the Agri-Food Tech Expo Asia in Singapore for 3 years, starting from next year. I would like to invite Mr. Po Chi Chuan, Executive Director, Singapore Tourism Board, on stage. Mr. Chua Wee Pong, Chief Executive Markets, Constella, and Mr. Tobias Eichberg, Member of the Board of Management, DLG, to join us for the signing. The signing will once again be witnessed by DPM and Coordinating Minister for Economic Policies, Mr. Heng Swee Keat, and Mr. Yap Chin Siang, Deputy Chief Executive, Singapore Tourism Board. And now, gentlemen, you may commence with the signing. Now, the Agri-Food Tech Expo Asia provides a focused exhibition platform with a living lab environment, thematic experiential zones, sandbox, and community-based learning for over 100 emerging and established industry players in the agri-food industry to launch, showcase, and testbed their solutions. The international event will attract agri and food businesses, producers, manufacturers, startups, and investors from all over the world. In a strategic partnership between Constella and DLG, the Agri-Food Tech Expo Asia will take place in Singapore in October next year as part of the Singapore International Agri-Food Week, with subsequent editions planned for 2023 and 2024. Gentlemen, I'd like to invite all of you to stand behind the table for a group photograph. Once again, you can hold the folder up in front of you. Thank you very much, and congratulations to all strategic collaborations. And thank you very much, DPM Heng, Mr. Yap, Mr. Po, Mr. Chua, and Mr. Eichberg. You may all return to your seats now. Unfortunately, there's still no entertainment just yet. They do have to change all the tables on stage. Now, we've all just witnessed the signing of the multi-year commitments between our government agencies, SFA, STB, EDB, and ESG, as well as Temasek and our event partners, Rethink Events, Constella, and DLG for the launch of SIAW. And most importantly, to build a vibrant agri-food ecosystem in Asia. The annual SIAW provides a platform for industry leaders to explore strategies for sustainable systems and production to build a vibrant agri-food hub in Asia. Agri-Food related events under this umbrella brand for 2021 will include the Roundtable on Novel Food Regulations by SFA, Asia Pacific Agri-Food Innovation Summit by Rethink, and the Executive Roundtable on Agri-Food Innovation by SG Innovate and ESG. And in 2022, we will have the inaugural Agri-Food Tech Expo Asia join the second edition of the annual Singapore International Agri-Food Week. Now, food is an integral part to our lives, especially here in Singapore. It's something we look forward to when we're hungry. It's something we look forward to when we're not hungry, and also to bond over with friends and family. However, the preferences of Asian consumers are beginning to shift, and is something businesses, investors, and regulators should take note of. To explain how agri-food innovation needs to keep pace with the changing palate of Asian consumers, I would like to invite Mr. Richard Skinner, Partner, Strategy and Food Security Specialist, PwC Singapore, to share the key findings from the recently published The Asia Food Challenge Report 2021. Mr. Skinner, please.
Good evening, everybody. It's fantastic to be back face to face with so many friendly faces. It's been a long time. I'm especially privileged to be talking about our favorite topic here in Singapore, our favorite pastime of food. What I'd like to focus in on this evening is that opportunity and challenge food presents us across the region of Asia. It's been mentioned a few times this evening, this 4.5 trillion number. This is what we expect to come online on an annual basis within the next 10 years. I think what's significant about this number, and to put it in context, that's effectively 2.5 USs coming online during that period. It's a huge amount of food. We've never seen this happen throughout the time of humanity. What's also hugely significant about this number, well over half of that is down to consumer choice. It's not just about chasing the cheapest food, population growth. This is all about what people want. They're chasing more value as opposed to just affordability. And this is what I'll focus in on tonight. And then lastly, we build and talk and think about this investment number. This 750 billion is incremental to the 800 billion we mentioned 2 years ago. This 1.5 trillion is a huge amount that we need to put into the system, but we do believe that the opportunity is there for those who seize it. So in terms of our report, we put this together over the last year with Temasek and Rabobank. We focused in on 3 things. One is, what is the consumer? What do they actually want? What goes behind that number? I'll talk about those trends. Secondly, and I think this is importantly, do investors believe in these numbers? Do they believe in the consumer at this day and age? Which in turn leads to the third point, what can businesses do about it? And if investors truly believe in this, should be businesses making this change to chase those new consumer demands? In order to understand this, we took a few different approaches. One, we interviewed thousands of consumers across the Asia region. We chose this to do it on a country level, and it was really very interesting just to see the differences between the different Asia countries on that regards. Secondly, we also did a lot of financial analysis, looking globally at well over 3,000 companies operating across the food chain, looking at that sort of multiple analysis. And it comes to that investor point, do they believe in what we're saying? The last point, we wanted to have some senior sort of confidence behind our findings. It's all well and good that consumers tell us that they want to be healthier and sustainable. I know that I want to, but is this really happening? Do we see this on the ground? Are businesses seeing this change? Will consumers actually pay for what they're demanding? So we spent a lot of time interviewing many of you, and thank you for that time over the last year. So, in terms of consumer behavior and what are consumers crying out for? First off, we've seen huge change at the consumer level. We're seeing huge change going on across Asia. Firstly, they're becoming far more affluent. We talk about that emerging middle class, but we're also seeing high affluent classes changing that demographic population across the group. There's also an aging population. We also see things happening at a household level. Actually, our household shrinking, which is changing a lot how people think about food. That leads to the point that people are thinking differently about food. What does healthier food mean to them? We've seen it mean different things in different countries. That translates into what people want and what people expect. From an expectation point of view, we've seen a lot of change here from a global perspective, the freedom of information as well. And I think this has really opened up the eyes of consumers to what's possible across the region. So in terms of those big trends, the first off, and I would say this is one of the biggest that we saw when interviewing consumers, it's all around health. Well over now, half of consumers out there will be checking labels, thinking about what they're about to eat. Will it do them good? Yes, a lot of this is still from a perceived perspective, and I think there needs to be more education on what really is health. But there's a big drive here and from consumer level. Secondly, fresh food is still extremely important in Asia. I actually noticed this when I came to Singapore 10 years ago, just culturally how strong this is within the region, and this really remains. And we see this freshness. I think it's how many of the local supermarkets have been able to compete with the big giants, always focusing on that element of fresh. I was at a vertical farm this morning, and literally the idea is that people will be able to pick the vegetables off the wall of their HDB, playing to that freshness trend. So I think this will remain in Asia especially strong. The next is around safety and traceability. We've had our fair share of scares across Asia, and I'm sure those will continue. But traceability is another big trend. And say, for example, as we were doing our interviews, someone gave the point of Japanese grapes. You could talk about Japanese grapes from a couple of different angles. One is just the variety, and people might pay an element of premium for that. But what they really pay for is actually where they're grown in Japan. And we see that they'll pay 3-4 times as amount for Japanese grapes in that regards. Next is sustainable consumption. This really is the topic of the moment. Food is a huge contributor to greenhouse gases, well over a third. And also we contribute in different ways. Just food waste is another 10% to the greenhouse gas emissions. So coming to a consumer level, people see this as increasingly important for them and is a big focus. Next, alternative proteins, and I think this is a nice area where a lot of this comes together. We can talk about more sustainable foods, potentially healthier foods in the future. A lot of these new trends all manifest in the new trend of alternative proteins. And over the last couple of years, we've really started to see that come to fruition in Asia as well. Yes, a lot of the initial development was coming out of the US, a beef burger focused market. But with the amazing work, say, that Temasek's been doing here across the region, focusing on more Asia varieties, say around fish and chicken and so forth, I do think the time is now for alternative proteins, and it presents a very exciting investment opportunity too. The last one, digital online purchasing. There's a lot of chat that this has been accelerated by COVID, but to be honest, we were seeing this well before. And actually, as we emerge out of COVID as well, that digital trend continues. People want it, the growth is still there. So what I would actually say about COVID, yes, it sort of potentially accelerated some of these trends, But these trends were there well before, and consumers were looking for these areas. So this isn't just a COVID fad that we're seeing in this regards. So on to my next point. Do investors actually believe in these trends? I must admit, when working in this industry, say a decade or so back, actually investors would often be scared about these topics that I was just mentioning. So if a company announced that it was going to produce more sustainable foods or healthier foods, actually, it may actually damage the valuation of companies because they see this as a hugely costly environment. But actually what we see now, there's huge confidence coming from that investor community. On the multiple analysis work that we did looking at thousands of companies globally, this really came through those offering a health, a digital, or a sustainable offering. The investors truly believe in this movement. They see that consumers are willing to pay here, there's the premium, and that we can overcome the costs involved. What's also very interesting is how investors now perceive old school companies. So those engaged in traditional areas of meat and veg, or even more so in, say, unhealthy packaged goods, there's actually a discount applied to those companies. So I think this is a wake-up call to many businesses out there that we need to change, we need to invest, otherwise we'll be left behind. So, with this investor sentiment behind us, what does this actually mean to businesses? And here we want to be honest in terms of that change. It's not easy. Yes, there's a huge incremental value that consumers are going to spend here, but we're also talking a lot of cost that's going to have to enter the supply chain, whether through research or just in the increased costs that we're seeing to operate in this space. Over the last year, food costs, raw material prices have gone up 30–40%. This is phenomenal. We've never seen them so high. And against the backdrop of COVID, some of the supply chain issues with what climate change is creeping up and doing to us, there's going to be big costs facing the industry. So this goes back actually to the report that we also did with Temasek and Rabobank a couple of years ago. There's huge opportunity from technology here. We've got many of them at our fingertips. This will help us increase yields, efficiency, and take out some of that increase in cost. We have to spend here to overcome that. The second bucket is talking about that consumer trend. And this is why I say in the past, investors might have been scared of making this change. Actually, the easiest way to create tasty food is throw some sugar and salt at it. But this isn't going to work going forward. We need to reformulate. We need to do more R&D. We have to fulfill those consumer trends. Otherwise, they won't be paying for our food. However, and we can see it happening, and when we talk to businesses, people are now willing to pay for this change. So you can increase your prices, whether that's by 10, 20, 30, 100%. You've got to work on that. But we do believe that that can come through, and that outweighs the cost that people are going to put in to do that. There's obviously other change that businesses will need to look at across the supply chain, whether that's tax implication, whether that's sort of the ESG multiple benefits. But overall, we do think if businesses invest, yes, there is some hardship to go through initially, the opportunity is there, and the opportunity is huge. So, in conclusion, we really have to understand what consumers are crying out for. And please read the report. What's fascinating are the differences between countries as well. Asia in no way is a homogeneous market. Big, quite frank differences. Yes, you've got to take that with a bit of a pinch of salt, what consumers are saying, and some of that's cultural reasons. But if you can really understand that, you can design your products that they will actually pay for. Secondly, is around that investor sentiment. So the money is there. So please take that as confidence to invest. Lastly, the change is significant. We've never seen so much change that needs to go through businesses and what government can do to incentivize that, whether that's educating consumers or facilitating some of that. But the change that we will need to bring about in Asia over the next decade to effectively create those 2.5 additional USs is phenomenal. But it's exciting change. And if we manage to do that, we can all be the center of that in Asia, and I think there's a great opportunity lying ahead of us. So please enjoy your dinner tonight. Enjoy the next few days of the Food Week. There's some fantastic presentations coming up. And thank you very much. Looking forward to seeing all of you later.
Thank you very much, Mr. Skinner. And now to discuss in more detail the findings of the Asia Food Challenge report and what this means for the next phase of agri-food development and collaboration in Asia, I'm delighted to introduce a panel of expert speakers for our fireside chat. First, to moderate this session, I'd like to invite Mr. Anuj Maheshwari, Managing Director, Agri-Foods, Temasek, to the stage. And now for our panelists, Mr. Marcel Smits, Chairman and CEO of Asia Pacific Cargill. Mr. Christian Wiegel, President Dole Asia Fresh. Ms. Karen Tay, General Manager Classic Fine Foods. Ms. Verlene Goh, Chief Food Fighter Alchemy Food Tech. Dr. Hazel Koo, Executive Director, Singapore Institute of Food and Biotechnology Innovation. And that is it, I think. Please welcome to the stage.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's an immense pleasure to host you all over here at the inauguration of the Singapore International Agri-Food Week. We hope to use this week to catalyze important conversations about how we can change the food system as we know it. What a great backdrop DPM Heng set for the industry. He eloquently laid down the Asia Food Challenge, and I know what the topic of next Asia Food Challenge is going to be: zero hunger, zero waste, and zero carbon. And with that ambitious goal, I would like to lay down the discussion for the panel today. But before I do that, I want to put some light on a survey that Temasek, along with PwC and Rabobank, commissioned earlier this year as we were preparing for the Asia Food Challenge report. And we surveyed 3,600 consumers across 12 countries around Asia Pacific. And we got some very interesting findings about what consumers want from their food. In fact, it is very clear, as was laid down from Richard's presentation, that most consumers desire better food. But what we found is that it's quite different in different countries. In China, 90% of the consumers are ready to pay a premium for better food. But this varies across countries. For example, in Japan, that number is only 32%, which means that inherently people trust the food that they are being offered in supermarkets and in food retail. In fact, in Singapore, it's a good sign that only 42% of the consumers are willing to pay for higher quality food. What is also interesting is what is the difference in the perception of quality. It's very different across different countries. Quality in the Western markets is closely associated with taste and the sensory profile of food, whereas in Asia, we constantly see that quality is perceived with freshness, the freshness of food. In fact, in Singapore, even the wildly popular bubble tea now offers freshly brewed, fresh tea to consumers over the pre-mixed of options. We also notice that food safety is paramount in the brains and the minds of consumers. And that's not a surprise. The United Nations estimates that 150 million food-related illnesses happen in Southeast Asia alone. And in fact, 175,000 deaths every year, which gives COVID sometime a run for its money. The good news is greener appetites are on a rise, and that's a very positive thing. Younger folks are leading this change. In fact, many younger teenagers, children are choosing vegetarian options. We surveyed that 1/3 of the consumers across Asia are willing to eat less meat every year. But you don't need to be a vegetarian for green diets. Food wastage is a huge issue. And this was alluded in the various talks before me. And governments are obviously improving or encouraging consumers to improve on that. In China, the government launched the Clean Plate campaign. However, they caveated it that it was focused on extreme eaters and lavish dinners. Let me make it clear that today's dinner is not a lavish dinner, and if you finish the food, you will not be considered an extreme eater. So now, to discuss the next phase of the development of Asia's agri-food industry, we have a terrific panel in front of us, very diverse, with 3 women and 3 men over here. We are represented by companies big and small, Cargill, which is the ultimate 200-year-old incumbent in the industry, and our own homegrown Alchemy, which is a startup which has been created to tackle food waste. So let me just introduce our various panelists. We have Marcel Smits, who's the chairman and CEO for Asia Pacific at Cargill. Marcel. Verlene Go, who's the chief food fighter for Alchemy Food Tech, a startup based here in Singapore, which is focused on the Singapore market, but also looking to get across Asia. Karen Tay, who's the general manager of Classic Fine Foods. Classic Fine Foods is a part of the Metro Group of Germany. It's a fine food specialist which operates in 11 different countries around the world. Dr. Hazel Koh, who's the executive director of the Singapore Institute of Food and Biotechnology Innovation, which was launched in year 2020. And finally, Christian Vigele, president of Dole Asia Fresh, one of the world's leaders in growing, sourcing, distributing, and marketing fresh fruits and vegetables around the world. So with that, let me start the first question with Marcel. Marcel, you're the ultimate incumbent in the industry. In some way, you're part of the food system as we know it. Many people think that the food system is broken. There's just too many resources that we use. There is a proliferation of cheap food. The real cost of food is not really understood by consumers, by regulators. Is that really true? How does Cargill see the current state of the food system? And more importantly, what are you doing to address that, given your important position in the food system?
I take off my mask, I think.
Yes, please.
Yeah, thank you. Good. So, Anush, let me just tell you a little anecdote. In the Smits family, I have a nephew, young man in his early 30s. He works for Moza Meats, a cultured meat company in the Netherlands. And then I have a niece in her early 20s, and she works for Impossible Foods. So I have 2 members in the family who are actively trying to put me out of business. And I keep saying to them, can you get on with it, please? So the questions that are coming at the food industry create real challenges. And for an incumbent, and you're very kind, you're an incumbent, other people will say, oh, you're the dinosaur of the industry. But it creates real challenges, and we've done the math. If the world goes down the path of alternative protein, that will have impact on our meat business, that will have impact on our feed business, and that will have impact on our agricultural supply chain business. But the big point about where we're at is we have increasingly come to realize that there is enormous opportunities out there. So as a result of all these stakeholder demands and requirements, there's all these new things that are coming at us at scale. And I haven't had an executive team meeting where we haven't spoken about something at scale that is a significant opportunity for Cargill. Whether or not that is sustainable or synthetic diesel, or some of our waste streams that have significant value for synthetic diesel, and how we're going to invest hundreds of millions of dollars. How we are bringing to life regenerative ag opportunities, connecting farmers to people, real live customers who need insets and offsets for their greenhouse gas emissions. How big an opportunity the greenhouse gas emission trading business is going to be for Cargill. How big an opportunity the trend towards more sustainable aquafeed is going to be. We launched an initiative called See Further, helping salmon farmers to reduce their greenhouse gases by 30% by 2030. All of those initiatives are scale initiatives for which we are very well positioned. And I'll close by saying, I think the key realization is that we need to get all these demands from stakeholders out of the domain of, well, we got to do that because that protects our license to operate. And it needs to go into the box of, whoa, this is a very significant opportunity for us. And the big shift that we've made in Cargill is that I think over the last 2 or 3 years, the entire organization has now come over to the side of this is an opportunity. And that's why I sit in all these meetings where all these individual businesses come and tell us the stories as to how they are going to capture the very significant opportunities that we face.
That's very heartening to know that Cargill looks at it as an opportunity when you are at the center of the disruption that's obviously happening around the industry. Verlene, let me bring you in over here. You are a new age startup. You started in 2014 with the mission of tackling chronic diseases using food. In fact, I read on your website that the world currently faces a diabetes epidemic, and some of the facts were really startling. 1/3 of all diabetes resides in China alone. And unfortunately, in Singapore, we do have the honor of being the second developed country with the highest incidence of diabetes, only behind the United States. Tell us about how you're going to do this, and what is the science behind what you're trying to do and the problem that you're trying to solve?
Diabetes is definitely a global epidemic now. There's actually 463 million diabetics in the world. The numbers is actually more than the active Amazon users currently, so it's a startling number. And the thing is that it's not about, like 90% of the people who are diabetic are actually suffering from type 2 diabetes, which is really linked to unhealthy foods and lifestyle. And the bigger problem that we have is not that there isn't healthy food available or that people don't know what foods are healthy for them. The main thing is that taste is king. At the end of the day, people will always eat what they love to eat. And for example, like in Singapore, obviously the Singapore government has been encouraging Singaporeans to take in brown rice, especially ever since the war on diabetes started in 2016. The consumption of brown rice has increased in Singapore from 3% to 8%. But what about the 92% of people who are still eating white rice? And white rice is the core fundamental staple in Asia. And unfortunately, white rice is also a very high GI food. In fact, the GI of white rice is even higher than table sugar, which essentially, although it doesn't taste sweet, it is by itself a sugar bomb. So that's what Alchemy wants to do. We want to hack people's diets through food innovation. And what you have on your table, in fact, is one of our products, Alchemy Fiber for Rice. So we came up with this unique blend of fiber powder that can lower the GI of white rice to the same level as brown rice without changing the taste and texture of foods. And I think as the Asia Food Report has shown, that food is very integral to cultures and taste preferences. At the end of the day, it is always challenging to try to change people's palates, but what we can do is really to look at how we can use food innovation to make people's diets healthier, to make foods more sustainable. For us at Alchemy, we do a lot of research on various plant ingredients, fibers, starches, extracts, etc. And we really combine it with our knowledge of food science and biochemistry to come up with the best blend of fibers so that they can modulate digestion, but yet at the same time preserve the taste and textures that people love of the foods. Thank you.
Thanks, Verlene. As a regular user of the Alchemy product, I can attest that it doesn't change the texture of the rice you eat, and certainly it's a startling fact that rice has the same glycemic index as sugar. So something for all of us to watch out with. So with that, Karen, I'll come to you. Classic Fine Foods sits between consumers and producers across the food value chain. You obviously deal with chefs. You are at the cutting edge of bringing different products to the market. And therefore, you probably have the best insight of what's happening. Do you really think the food industry is ready for change? All the surveys over here indicate that consumers are willing to make certain trade-offs between healthier foods and more sustainable options. What do you see when you are servicing food companies and chefs and so on and so forth in the industry?
Good evening, everyone. Yes, Anush, I do believe that the industry is ready for change. And alternative protein is a sector where you actually see this change happening at lightning speed. And I'm bullish because of my first-hand experience. 3 years ago, I flew to Macau just to taste Impossible foods for the first time in a restaurant. And I remember calling our sales manager after, and I told her, this is a game changer. We have to bring it to Singapore. But to be honest, we were not 100% sure how the chefs and the consumers will take to it. Initially, we were talking mostly to the early adopters in F&B and large hospitality groups with a sustainability focus. But soon after, we were overwhelmed by the interest from a very diverse customer base. And the Impossible Break became one of our best-selling SKUs in 2019. Fast forward to today, the brand is at 74% brand awareness in Singapore, and we can skip several steps when we are introducing new products, new brands, be it Tyndall or Karana or Good Catch, which you will have the chance to taste later on. So the conversation has moved from a very basic one around what is plant-based meat, why is it more sustainable, how do you cook with it, to a much higher level. Is it soy? Is it other legumes? Do you have any service-ready versions? And this is what my customer wants. Do you have it? So indeed, the end consumer is getting much more sophisticated as well as curious, mostly the millennials and Gen Zs. And even chefs who personally do not subscribe to the movement, I think they recognize the business sense to have more plant-based options on the menu because their customers are asking for it. And I think this becomes much more consumer-led currently. And with regards to consumer perception, I think while taste and price remain key drivers, we're definitely seeing consumers looking for more than just food. So whether it's more premium, whether it's healthier, more sustainable, locally sourced, or even food that offers an experience. I think if we look at also the value proposition of health, it seems to still carry more weight than sustainability, at least in this part of the world. Finally, we talk about the new Asian consumer. They're highly influenced by global trends and social media. So they're also, some of them are also starting to change the way they consume to be closer to their aspirations and ideals. And we certainly see this change happening quickly.
Thanks, Karen. It's good that you see similar trends. And I remember the early days of investing in these alternate products. Most people were skeptical whether consumers will be willing to try that. But we have come a long way, and especially here in Singapore, where we have launched several of the products first time around the world. I think with that, Hazel, I want to bring in you and talk about what role research institutions can play in this transformation of the agri-food ecosystem or the food value chain. I know A-Star has taken a very forward-looking view around this. Can you also talk about the Science and Technology Master Plan that's in the works in Singapore around accelerating the pace of innovation in the entire sector?
Thanks, Anush, for the question. Research institutions can certainly play a big role in driving tech innovations towards better food. And the AFC report talks about investing extensively in creating healthier food options and still retaining that local taste appeal. And this is where SIFPI can be your research partner. SIFPI is one of the 17 research entities in A-Star, and we are the only research institute in A-Star that focuses on food. And we have 3 key research pillars in food process engineering, clinical nutrition, as well as industrial biotech for the biomanufacturing of food, feed, as well as specialty ingredients. And concurrently, we are also stepping up our efforts, like what Alchemy is doing, to develop nutritious food to meet the consumer demand for healthier food options. And one example that I can share is the recent launch of the low GI oat cookie, that we have developed using our unique blend of plant-based ingredients, and we have worked through with our VCC spin-off, Nutrient, and to introduce it in the soft launch during the National Day Parade. So this special oat cookie, when you consume it, it is able to reduce the blood glucose level by more than 50% and still maintain its organoleptic profile in comparison to a regular oat cookie in the market. So CIPY is very open to work with partners to co-develop along the food innovation value chain. And in conjunction with this SIAW launch, we are very delighted to be able to partner with Temasek to both collaborate in capacity building as well as capability building through the Food Tech Innovation Center to bring to bridge the lab to market gap, where we work with food innovation startups as well as corporate entities to co-develop with them along the food innovation value chain to bring food innovation through the pilot scale and to bring products to market. And CIPY will bring our capabilities, our deep expertise in fermentation, in processing, as well as downstream processing to the Food Tech Innovation Center. And we hope that through the Food Tech Innovation Center platform, partners can also leverage on the wider capabilities of CIPY in clinical nutrition that I spoke about earlier, as well as in the other aspects of our industrial biotech, for example, in synthetic biology. And Anush, you also asked about the S&T master plan. The public sector food R&D is actually accelerating at a rapid pace, following the 144 million Sing dollars that the government has invested in 2019. SFA as well as A-Star are now developing a food S&T master plan to chart out Singapore's strategy in food resilience, food security, as well as potentially opening up the paradigm to look at nutrition security. So we are developing the priorities to meet these goals and to develop ambitious plans that would also anchor on sustainability as a foundation.
Thanks, Hazel. And it's so heartening to see the kind of development that's happening across the different agencies in Singapore and such a widespread development. And as I look at from my hat as an investor, what we are doing over here is clearly putting us on the global map, not just developing the industry for Asia. So with that, let me come to you, Christian. Dole is obviously a very well-known company, biggest producers of fresh food around Asia. You also have a very audacious goal of affordable nutrition to 1 billion people that you want to provide through fresh fruits and vegetables over the year. Talk to us about how do big companies get legitimacy to do that? What specifically are you going to do to provide this affordable nutrition to 1 billion people and help us achieve the zero hunger goal that DPM Heng talked about?
Thank you for the question, Anush. And I think it's not so much a question about legitimacy, but it's really making sure that all the big companies, small and big, are working together towards the goal. So in our case, we've been around for more than 170 years. And you could argue, well, we could continue moving forward the way we've worked over the last 100 years. But we realized with the challenges out there in terms of what we talk about climate change, soil availability, we have to do things differently moving forward. Business as usual is not good enough. And that applies for smaller companies, medium companies, and larger companies. So in our case, we looked back 2 years ago at our history and said, what can we do differently? How can we take a humble banana, which is one of our core products, or a humble sweet pineapple to become a good banana? And that means moving forward towards sustainability. So fueling the growth on a sustainable way. And even companies such as ourselves, who have been there for 170 years, we need to do things differently. We need to grow banana from a sustainable perspective. We heard the buzzword of regenerative agriculture. We need to provide more livelihood to the small farmers. We need to look at our supply chain. How much plastic do we use in our supply chain? Can we get rid of plastic? How much waste do we have in the land and while the product finally reaches our consumers? There's more than 30% waste. So we came out with a Dole promise, 2 years ago, which is all about providing sunshine for all in a sustainable way. So it interbalances between people, planet, and prosperity. And they're all centered around 6 promises, one of them being taking out all the plastic by 2025. Another audacious goal is reducing our current waste of around 30% to 0% waste. Yeah? So we have all these 6 promises, but we also know that large companies as ourselves, we can't do that by ourselves. We need to work together, such as with A-Star, such as with new companies which are out there, to help us tackle these 6 promises and make sure that on a long-term basis, we take that growth and we fuel that growth on a sustainable basis, what we call sunshine for all.
Yeah. No, Christian, I think a very important point you raised, that status quo in the agri-food industry is not really an option anymore. Unless everybody changes and collaborates, we will be faced with a real problem, not just from a climate change perspective, but the health and wellness issue, the epidemics, the various things that we were talking about. One of the, I would like to now open this to the floor. One of the key issues is that such change can only be brought about by innovation. And of course, we heard about what the government is doing in terms of innovation, supporting that, and we've seen that in many other countries as well. But let me throw a statistic. The agri-food industry has probably the lowest innovation spend as the corporate sector in the world. And that's that's not an exaggerated figure. It's a number that we worked with PwC last year. Do we think, and I would like to hear from the corporate leaders on this side, do you think that the corporates are ready for change in terms of making more investments in innovation, having R&D spends that can actually match with what the governments are ready to provide in the industry? Maybe Marcel, you can talk about that.
Yeah. So true, huh? The agri-food industry has been an industry that has been very used to very incremental small innovations. And 1 or 2% of yield increases, do that over a bunch of decades, and you get phenomenal outcomes. And what we have now taken to our board and our shareholders is look at the amount of money that is now going into venture capital.
Yeah.
And and I don't want to blow smoke in your face, but Temasek has been out there, and we notice. You have invested in a whole bunch of really exciting startups, and when we looked at it 2 years ago, we said to our board, there's all this money pouring into the food and agri sector now in pursuit not of incremental innovation, but of very disruptive innovation. And we're talking about billions of dollars. So I think it's changing. Now, the second part of the question is, are you going to do that inside of large organizations? I am hopeful that large organizations will do so. We are definitely do so. We have 4 work streams. Work stream number 1 is we have set aside a certain amount of money every year for venture capital investment. And we're working with you and other partners to see what are the investments that we want to make in order to drive innovation. 1, we have an internal incubator for digital initiatives called the Edge Board, in which we are putting money in, and I want it to be more, but we've made a good start. We have said a significant part of our R&D expense needs to go towards fundamental innovation rather than small increments. And then lastly, we have an initiative called Horizon that tries to fundamentally disrupt the way we integrate with our customers. So those 4. I think there is a realization that unless we spend enough money and put enough resource behind it, it's not just a money thing, but it's also about managerial intent and talent, and unless we are very deliberate about that, I think we're going to be left behind. So I am optimistic that large food players will.
That's good to know. And Christian, is that the similar view at Dole in terms of investing in innovation, actually putting hard dollars to work, hiring people, younger folks who look at things very differently?
It's a very strong yes. Yeah. And I think what we realized is that through innovation, we can actually create a lot of value. Just give an example, right? So we have got around 30% banana waste. Yeah? And you can think, what can you actually do with that banana waste? Is there an opportunity to upscale that banana waste, which we have in the farms? And to give a very concrete example, we just signed very recently our cooperation with EDB for working together on upscaling the waste which we have in the farms. Maybe there's some enzymes which you can create out of banana skins. Maybe there's some special oils which you can create out of pineapple skins. Maybe there's some other byproducts which actually at the end of the day create value for the consumer, but also value for the investor and also value for the planet. Because rather than putting that waste into landfill, it goes into some repurposed, higher valued added product. And this is a realization which we now have, that actually through innovation, we can actually tackle a lot of different topics around people, planet, and prosperity.
That's very interesting what you're saying. The question, obviously, the banana has been around for a long time, and it's good to see that the need for change in the industry is triggering all these discussions that we can use the banana peel to solve some disease. Maybe we should have done it 20 years ago, but it's good that we are doing it today because technology has developed so much. Verleen, let me get back to you on the health and wellness issue. You talked obviously about diabetes, but what are the other challenges that we have in the agri-food industry when it comes to health and wellness? What are the big problems that today, if you solve the diabetes problem and come up with these products, what will be the next thing that Alchemy is looking to solve?
I think the big health issues is not going to go away. I mean, like things like obesity, diabetes, hypertension, high cholesterol. These are definitely the strongest health concerns everywhere in the world, and these are definitely extremely tied to food and nutrition of today. In fact, there are like so many people with these concerns, and there's increased like awareness and also demands from customers for these more healthy foods. And I think one of the key concerns is actually the aging population. So in China, 1 in 4 will be above 60 by the year 2050, and in Singapore, it's by the year 2030. So Asia is rapidly aging, and with like an increased aging population, there's also going to be an increase in chronic diseases, right? And obviously, the burden on societal as well as economic costs is going to be tremendous. And I think that's really like a big driver for the agri-food industry to look at, because it's really also our responsibility to offer healthier and more nutritious foods to people to make them like live healthier and age better. So one of the things that I came across was actually this statistics on life expectancy versus healthy average life expectancy. So for example, in Singapore, the life expectancy is about 83 years old, but the healthy active life expectancy is actually 74, which is, there is actually a 9-year age gap between how long you will live to and how long you will be healthy. And this is not unique to Singapore. In China, in Japan, that gap, between the life expectancy and the healthy life expectancy is also at about a 9 to 12-year age gap. And this is a huge statistic, because it means that there is going to be more people who are older, but are they going to be healthy? What exactly? This is going to stress like the health system, right? And I think looking at that, we come to realize that it is not only an issue with the healthcare industry. I mean, the healthcare industry is already plagued with, COVID, other types of communicable diseases. And I think the food industry has a big role to play in helping with non-communicable diseases as well.
Thank you for that. And Hazel, would you maybe shed some light on what A-Star is doing when it comes to health and wellness issues, the clinical nutrition side of it, customizing products for better living?
Yes, certainly, Anush. So earlier I talked about the low GI oat cookie. Over at SIFB, we do have a very strong group that is looking at clinical nutrition, and we are using our scientific understanding, our clinical validation to come up with nutritious food products. We want to be able to put a nutritious label to enhance human health. And this is certainly an effort that we will intensify in the coming years. And other than the low GI oat cookie I spoke about, there is also a line of healthy noodles and other healthy snacks that we are working with partners to bring these products into commercialization.
Thank you for that. Let me move a little bit from, we talked about innovation. We've obviously talked about the health and wellness side of the food industry. Let me talk a little bit about sustainability in agri-food. And obviously, part of sustainability is alternate protein. Maybe, Karen, I'll bring you over here in. Talk us a little bit about alternate protein. Will it really go mainstream? Will it stay 10% of the market? You know, fast forward 10 years, will we start seeing cell-based meats come to the market? You know how adoption is happening. Can we see that kind of paradigm change? I mean, I'll just, it reminds me when Impossible Foods first made a presentation, they showed us a cow was like the horse back in the day. And then today, nobody uses a horse to come anywhere or go anywhere. So are we in that kind of paradigm shift, or are we going to see a mix of everything around?
I think for alternative protein to become truly mainstream, it's going to take a bit more time. I think certainly in the coming decade, we will see it becoming more widespread. And I think for alternative protein to really become mainstream, a couple of things first needs to happen. Price parity aside, I think we need to have a wider range of products. So it might be the next generation of alternative protein that is reproducing whole meat cuts and trying to replicate the fatty texture that consumers are looking for, through the use of hybrid technologies. I think also, secondly, we need production capacity to scale quickly. So that means, startups and food companies in the space need to partner with large-scale manufacturers who can produce for the masses. Then, of course, we will need the large and mainstream FMCG and food companies to incorporate alternative protein into their ingredients, or even better, make it the center of the plate. And of course, also specialty food producers or very traditional or local food, say fishball here, that they are also starting to look for alternatives. And then finally, I think we need the alpha generation to become young adults where they're making their own consumption choices. So my daughter is almost 5, and she doesn't eat meat, but loves plant-based options. So I think her generation will take alternative protein mainstream.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's probably a generational shift rather than a linear shift. If anybody else has any views on alternate protein becoming mainstream or staying, Marcel?
Yeah, Anush. I had somebody, a board member of Barnes & Noble, explain to me exactly this year, 21 years ago, that Amazon was not a real business. This is a real life event. This is, directly to me, board member from Barnes & Noble. We don't take that view. Alternative protein is going to be a meaningful part of the market. How big it's going to be, we'll have to wait and see. We take the view that it's here to stay. We also take the view that the traditional industry will be very, very important in feeding the world, and all the increase of consumption that we've talked about earlier today. And the traditional industry will have to make a big step in terms of making their products more sustainable. So we're running with an initiative called Beef Up in the United States, helping the traditional beef sector to become 30% less emitters of traditional beef. That's a really good initiative. Both things will happen. The traditional industry will have much better attributes from a greenhouse gas emission point of view, and there will be a new industry. And we're investing, for example, in cultured meat, and we're playing in the alternative vegetable protein replacers. So yeah, it's here to stay.
Absolutely, that's good to know. And of course, the traditional supply chain will also improve itself in terms of its carbon efficiency. My final question to all the panelists is really about Singapore, Asia Pacific, and how do we continue Singapore's positioning as an agri-food innovation hub. We all know, all of you have been part of this 3-4 year journey where Singapore has made itself in the global map, thanks to the efforts of the government agencies, the private sector, the investors, obviously the startups and the research laboratories. As we think about the next 2-3 years, and as platforms like the SIAW come up, what does Singapore need to do to make sure that we stay ahead of the game? What will be the one or two things that can be there as we compare to ecosystems that are developing in obviously North America, in Israel? You know, we are increasingly seeing even Australia and New Zealand kind of coming up and talking about this thing. So maybe with that, Hazel, if it's okay, I'll start with what do you think would be the key definers of success, and what does it take to stay ahead of the game?
I think fostering successful partnerships is important, and it is for the public sector to work with the private sector in winning strategies. And we spoke about that increase in the Asian market, and while the Singapore Food Story was launched in 2019, with a focus primarily looking at the national needs of a 30 by 30 goal, I feel that the Asian market, the Asian opportunities should not be ignored. And this is where both public sector as well as private sector investments become critical. And it's also important for the local agri-industry to set itself high ambitions to target this Asian market.
Thanks. Marlene?
I think it's really about listening to the consumers and coming up with products that is really in line with what they want to have in their diets. So like for us, we really look at what consumer diets are, and we innovated on, like the alchemy fiber for rice to make the rice like lower GI. We're looking at new innovations surrounding snacks, surrounding reducing sugar, reducing fat. We have a partner, a very famous local bakery, Swee Heng. They introduced like a sugar-free chiffon cake. They replaced all their chiffon cakes in their stores, and they're selling it like really hot cakes now. Because there's actually a demand for less sugar and lower GI and more fiber products. So I think listening to the consumers and is really going to be what keeps us like up our game and keep us forward in terms of our progress as a country as well.
Thank you.
To add on, I think to really create world-class facilities for the startups and the ecosystem, as well as to develop or create excellence through the institutes of higher learning, and definitely continue to push the frontiers and really keep an open mind for innovation.
Thank you.
It's definitely developing this ecosystem, an ecosystem where private companies and public institutions can work together, building on the great history of Singapore over the many years, where people come together in this geography and exchange their ideas and create this platform which is easy to work on. And at the same time, it's definitely talent development. Working together with institutions such as A-Star, but also public institutions, universities, because the challenges are huge. If we just take this plastic bottle, how are we going to replace plastic in the supply chain to non-fossil based, home compostable, regenerative packaging? If we take that example, you can see that this ecosystem is needed now, and it's going to be needed in the next 10 years, and it's going to be needed in 30 years. And I think Singapore is very well positioned for that.
Thank you, Christian. And finally...
I think the slogan 30 by 30 was great. Tremendous progress on setting up the ecosystem. Great. What we now need to add is, hopefully there's somebody worrying about, can I invest 100 million in Verleen's company because it could be worth a couple of billion a couple of years from now? So investment at scale, and I think we need a bigger VC community that is willing to make really big bets, just like people in California are making really big bets. And then lastly, Christian's point, I think more work to be done in terms of how do we make sure that we have the most creative minds willing to live here and turn some of those ideas into opportunities at scale. Singapore should have an ambition not just to have 30 by 30, but should have an ambition that if there is going to be a company that is going to lead aqua production, in a vertical building, that company should not just service the Singapore market, but that should be a global business. So what needs to be true for making sure that some of these businesses become global winners?
Excellent. Thank you, Marcel. And I think with that, we come to an end. But I'd like to summarize what we heard about in the last question is, how do we preserve our Singapore and continue to grow its ambition of being a world-class agri-food innovation hub. And I think from all the panelists, I heard 6 things which can help us continue this, this journey. First is a partnership approach, and hopefully the SIAW and forums like this go a long way in fostering partnerships. As Temasek, we announced today 2 partnerships with ADM and Kramer, and likewise, I hope this week will spur a lot of these partnerships. I think, Verlene, you talked about listening to consumers, and certainly that's a very useful thing to have. World-class infrastructure and facilities is the third prong. I think the fourth one is the ecosystem mentality and really bringing everybody together. Finally, talent development and being at the forefront of creative talent, higher learning institutions, and all of that. And finally, Marcel, what you said is investment at scale and people willing to take big bets. This is all what is needed from this esteemed panel to continue for Singapore to be the hub for Asia-Pacific agri-food innovation in decades to come. And with that, I want to thank all the panelists for being here today, and hopefully you found this panel interesting. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Anuj, and of course to all our panelists for that roundtable discussion. Now, it is clear that there are many challenges facing our food system, but with that also comes huge opportunities for innovation. And it will be exciting to see how Singapore International Agri-Food Week catalyzes the transformation towards sustainable food production. And with this, we've come to the end of the program segment for the Singapore International Agri-Food Week launch. I would like to thank all our virtual guests for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again at Singapore International Agri-Food Week event in the future.